So, it's kind of difficult, I suppose, for me to talk about it because I was so young when it happened. I had gone on a skiing accident with some some family and then their family who I wasn't related to. And it was my first time skiing, so they were trying to teach me the ropes. And I don't remember the accident itself, but I remember I had just gone up a level on the hill and I wiped out. And I grew up very, very shy and reserved, and I would never try anything I failed at again. But I was so determined to do it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try skiing this hill again. And from what I was told, I was with my twin sister at the time, actually. So what happened was I ended up skiing off course, and my helmet was too big, so it came off and I skied right into a tree. Um, so I was very lucky that I had someone I happened to be skiing with who was a nurse that specialized in the trauma department. This was in Vermont, so I wasn't even at home. Luckily, we had medical insurance, but what ended up happening was I instantly got taken to the hospital and I was in a medically induced coma for a week. While I was in that coma, they drilled into my head. Um, so my head was open, and because I was in a coma, I had my breathing tube, feeding tube, and catheter. And I also ended up getting compartment syndrome. So compartment syndrome is when the a compartment of your body, mine was my leg, it basically all the tissue around the muscle ends up swelling up. So there's a lot of pressure and you have to cut open the body part to release the pressure, or else you have to get my leg amputated. So I was very lucky they caught that as well. Because I was unconscious, they didn't know I was in pain. And so I had two surgeries for that. And honestly, the American healthcare system is pristine. They had the most amazing surgeries. My scars are not noticeable. I have some on my head up here that you can't really see anymore. And obviously, like, it's a big deal to deal with insurance and everything. So my parents had to drive down from Canada to Vermont, and the people in the hospital dealt with everything. It was amazing. And I did wake up in and out of consciousness a couple times, but because the accident was so traumatic, they didn't know if I was going to wake up in a vegetative state. So when I first woke up, I didn't even remember my family. I didn't recognize them. I couldn't associate it. The only person I remembered was my twin sister, but I didn't know her birthday. But I knew my birthday, so it was kind of silly. So in addition, I also had a damaged eye nerve, fractured pelvis, fractured tailbone, and a broken leg. So I had a full leg cast and I was still in and out of consciousness when I got my own jet back to McMaster Hospital, where so I believe in the first hospital I spent about 1 or 2 weeks there, and then back in McMaster I spent a long time in the ICU. And I don't know if I had to go through any rehabilitation then because it is very hard for me to remember. It was almost 10 years ago now, but I was very lucky to have a really strong support system with me. And I think a big part of it was because I was so young. I had people from my school and my teachers and a lot of family coming to visit me. And it was a very difficult time afterwards because it's already hard enough being in a prepubescent age and not really knowing like who you are and going through so many changes. So to kind of have to deal with so much more going on in your head, it was really troubling for me. So growing up afterwards, I didn't know if a lot of who I was me or a result of my brain injury. So when I was in the hospital, I was kept very active. My mom was always with me, so very solid support system, which is so, so important. You need to know that there's people there who are going to support you throughout the whole process. You don't want to feel alone because you already have heightened feelings of alienation afterwards. And so I did a lot of Sudoku just to keep me busy, some arts and crafts, and they had because McMaster is a children's hospital, they had their own little area for like adolescents to hang out, which was pretty fun. But I was so shy, I didn't really talk to anyone. It was just nice to be around others. So after a couple weeks, I ended up going back home. And my mom was off work the whole time to take care of me because the accident was so bad. I did have a very, very miraculous recovery, considering I didn't even remember my family, and I almost gained all of my memory back afterwards. But I do, like I said, I don't know if a lot of my symptoms were from me or from the accident. So I blamed myself for a really long time for feeling the ways I did. Like a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of trouble being in crowded places with a lot of people, just depression. And at that age, you already feel like very self conscious. So it kind of heightened that feeling, I think. And I got a lot of comments that I had changed. And it's kind of like, obviously, you're going to change after your brain's been affected like that. So all throughout high school, there were things that people would make fun of. They didn't make it was like friends who would joke or about things, but it really hurt because, for example, it takes me a while to process things, and it still does. And I got made fun of for that, for taking a couple minutes to understand a joke, or I always had to work a little bit extra in school. And a really big thing I struggled with is the fact that, well, everybody will struggle with, is the fact that brain injuries have unseen symptoms. So you can look at someone with a brain injury and think they're completely fine because you can't see their injury. And because you can't see it, nobody really believed I was experiencing symptoms. So I did try to get extra help in school. The teachers didn't believe I needed it because I looked okay. And so I always struggled with that. So I always worked really, really hard. It wasn't until a couple years ago I really started to open up and kind of become my fullest self. A really big part of that for me was having friends who didn't make fun of me for my symptoms, but embraced it as a part of who I was. And it's important I suppose the difference there is that I wasn't trying to hide them. I was embracing them as who I was, as the new me, rather than being embarrassed by it. So, although I did have a really good recovery, I still experienced symptoms regarding execution of my thoughts, in some ways, reading out loud, processing, light and sound sensitivity, and I'm not able to multitask very well, which I don't know if that's just me or the brain injury. Um, I'm trying to think. Oh, yeah. So I guess this is kind of personal, but this is kind of what it's for. But because I was 12 years old when it happened, I was going through puberty. So I do remember I wasn't able to shower myself. So I would be showered by nurses. And the fact that they were seeing, like my naked body just really, really set me back and made me extra self conscious. And especially going through, I don't know, I don't want to, menstruation. I got my first period when I was unconscious in the hospital. And my mom wouldn't even tell me because she knew how uncomfortable I already felt. And so I was really lucky. My sister would always come visit me. She was my best friend. And from an outside perspective, she said that she didn't notice anything had changed with me, but I really felt it did. So it kind of just shows you that even the people that are closest to you don't understand how you can be affected. So lately I've been really getting into mindfulness and meditation, and just kind of to, I don't know, not figure myself out, but more as a coping mechanism for dealing with all the busyness in my life and learning to calm down and take a minute and step back. And it's important to reflect on your experiences. So I've been doing that a lot lately, and especially with my peer mentee, being able to talk to her and let her know that I understand what she's going through on a different level is it's really nice to talk about it with someone. Even though her brain injury wasn't traumatic, it's nice to know that somebody understands. So even now, I understand that I'm going to have symptoms in the future that I don't have now because I had symptoms in the past I don't have now. And it's an ongoing process, but it's nice to know that you're not the only one. And I never had that growing up because nobody around me ever had a brain injury the way I did. So the peer mentor program has actually been very beneficial for me as well. And I'm really glad I joined it. And I really can't think of too much else to think of at the moment. I know I kind of rushed that. I guess it's because I talk about it so often that I just know like the key points. So
Okay. So a couple questions. Do you want to tell, excuse me, a little bit about the peer mentor program? Do you want to just explain that to some people on the call won't know what that is?
yeah, so the peer mentor program is with the Ontario Brain Injury Association, and they kind of just get a little bit of information about you and your experience, and they try to match you up with somebody in similar age and gender who has had a similar experience. So I was kind of nervous to go about it because I was so young when it happened, but for somebody who had a mild brain injury, our symptoms are very similar now. So we just call once a week and we talk about, well, she talks to me about something she's been struggling with, and I tell her about my experience and ways I've been coping. Um, and we get off track sometimes and just have like our own little conversations, but it's important to like become friendly with your mentor or mentee. I guess I'm the mentor. And it is a little different because her experience came from a car accident and she is a bit older than me. So it's kind of strange talking to someone older than me and trying to advise them, but it's been really nice. So we call once a week for about an hour and just review our week and what's been going on. And she'll tell me things that she's been struggling with and with her lawyers and what she's been doing to cope. And I just gives my opinion, I guess, like, oh, that sounds great, but have you tried like an alternative? So it's good. It's good. Yeah. I hope that was
Okay.
an okay explanation.
Yeah, thank you. Tell us a little bit about what your relationship is with your twin sister right now.
Right now, well, she's not living at home right now. She's living at her student house. So we haven't been talking too much, but she was she's my number one. Like obviously we've been best friends like since birth. So when this happened, they actually my teachers used to make her go around to every classroom and tell them what happened right after, which is very traumatic in itself to even, because she watched me like ski right into the tree and she watched me go through everything. And they stayed in the Ronald McDonald House while I was in the hospital. So um, she she was a really great support system when I was going through a lot of mental illnesses that were heightened, such as my depression. If I would just break out crying, she would be there to help me and make sure everything's okay. She was always there to validate my feelings. And even if she wasn't in the best mood, and she's not the most sensitive person, she was always there for me. So we didn't hang out all the time and we didn't have the same friends. Like we had our own lives, but whenever I needed her, she was there. And I was actually talking to her the other day about if she about her experience as watching or being an outsider, I guess, of a brain injury. And she said because she was so young too, she barely remembers it. which I mean is good in some aspects that it's not still haunting her. But I know at the time, because she was in school, so she had to go to school every day worrying about me. So she would come visit me every single night, and we would just do like normal things. And as soon as I got home, we would just do normal things. And I think she really wanted to normalize the experience for me, as opposed to my family, who, because obviously adults are going to make it a huge deal, because it is a huge deal. So she kind of just made the situation as normal as she could for me being in the hospital every day, not really having anyone to talk to. So, like, I think at the time we really liked Glee. So she would just come to the hospital room and we would just watch episodes of Glee, like simple stuff. And it's the simple stuff that kind of means the most.
Right. Thank
So,
you. So I've got a few questions coming in here now, so this is great. Did the doctor discuss any correlation between your changing hormones and the effects on your brain injury? Timing of your period coming on, I understand there may be some link between progesterone levels and recovery. Have you talked about that at all with your doctors?
I think because I was young when it happened, my doctor didn't talk to me directly about it, but possibly with my parents. They haven't told me anything about it. I was at the age when those things happen, and so it wasn't weird that it happened when it did. Um, Obviously, I was super uncomfortable. I don't know about the setbacks, like psychologically. I think it really, I don't know this from a medical perspective, but I do believe I was set back in terms of my personality from developing. And maybe that's not a developmental issue. Maybe it's just from, the heightened feelings of alienation and self-consciousness. But on a psychological perspective, I don't exactly know, but I just know how I felt about it.
Yeah.
I didn't have too much contact with the doctors because, like, I was so young. But something actually this is kind of a weird side effect, I guess, is that I like I have this issue where when I was in the hospital, I would always sorry, this is really uncomfortable, that I would always like pee my bed. And so now it's weird because whenever I have to pee, I don't know until right before I have to go, because I guess my brain and my body just can't make that connection. Or a little off topic, another symptom I have is I get some twitches up and down my legs, but I can feel it activating the neurons in my brain through the nervous system. And it's kind of cool because I can feel everything connecting, but it also makes me realize that they're in the nervous system, that there are things that are disconnected as well, like not being able to feel myself when I need to pee
Yeah.
in a weird way. So anyways, from a psychological perspective, I don't know about the whole puberty adolescent correlation other than my perspective.
Right. Great. Here's another one. Thank you for sharing your story, Kaitlyn. You're very inspiring and strong, and you have a very brave spirit. I also just finished my 4th year at Wilfrid Laurier University, and I'm wondering how you found completing 4 years of university, and if you had any resources in place to help you through your studies.
I did not have any resources put in place because I was scared to ask. Like I tried to get them in high school. The guidance counselor wouldn't really let me because I looked okay. So I didn't really try and follow through. University, it definitely overstimulated me a lot of the time. Um, I did take only 4 courses this year, which I found very helpful. But I'm also the type of person where I need to be like, go, go, go all the time. Where if I do nothing, I can do nothing for days. So I also always try to keep myself busy. And so university kind of helped with that. It definitely is difficult to stay on track on one thing for a long amount of time. So I did find that like I'd study for an hour and then do a 20-minute break to break up the segments so I could still push myself to get a good study session, but not to the point of overstimulation. So yeah, I did finish my 4th year. I do have a couple more courses to finish up, but definitely doing less courses helped a lot more, because then, as opposed to focusing on a little bit on a lot of things, you can focus on more on less things, which I find is very beneficial, because it is very difficult to focus on many different things at once. It is also very difficult to sit in a long lecture. Like if you have a 2 hour, 3 hour lecture, it's very hard to stay tuned for, like a normal, I don't want to say normal and make us sound weird, but for like a normal brain, as opposed to someone who has a brain injury or disability, it is a lot harder to stay focused, and especially staring at a screen. Like my screen is constantly on night mode because I hate the light. And so, yes, it was difficult and I did feel overstimulated, but I learned when to take breaks.
Great. Okay, here's another one. You said that your execution of thoughts have been affected. Has it affected your career life? Only if you want to share. So,
So my career life isn't that much. I As jobs throughout high school, definitely. I was very, very anxious and I was going through depression. So there was some days where I'd go into work and just not be in the mood at all. But you can't really call in sick for those kinds of things. Um, I worked in restaurants as a hostess and a busser, which is around a lot of people and in a very small place. I would become overwhelmed. Sometimes I'd cry and have to leave just because I felt so overstimulated. Currently, I work on a beverage cart at a golf course, and that it was very hard for me at first for the constant talking and make conversations flow, but it really helped me learn how to think on my feet more, because it is such a high customer service job. And like I said, I grew up very, very shy, very, very introverted. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago I really became like outgoing and like confident with myself, which kind of shows how long it could take for somebody to feel comfortable with their new symptoms. So, in terms of career life, I mean, job life, it definitely has affected me. It hasn't really prevented me from escalating in any way. But I think putting myself out of my comfort zone helped me grow a lot. And that's not something I'm usually okay with. So, oh, wait, I can't hear you.
is that better? Have you attempted to ski again?
No,
No?
I've been offered. I'm really scared of getting PTSD while I'm up there and having it happen again. I've never been a sports person. I honestly didn't even want to go on the trip. My mom just thought it would be a good idea to get me to experience new things. So it wasn't even something I was interested in at the time. So I don't think it's like I wouldn't not ever do it again. I'm just not ready to try it now.
Okay. And are you doing any physical therapies right now? What, if so, what are you doing?
Right now, I did have a lot of issues with my knee. So, I broke my leg and I had compartment syndrome. So I feel out of touch with my leg a lot. Sometimes it's almost like a phantom limb.
Mhm.
So I went to go see a chiropractor for a while because I was having issues with my knee. And I've known this since like the accident, because my foot's a little sideways. It's like I don't know what it's called. So, anyways, driving a lot makes it really difficult. So I went to the chiropractor. He gave me exercises to do, and I'm very lucky that I don't need to get surgery or anything now, because I actually did go get an X-ray done to make sure there was nothing wrong with me. But doing the exercises my chiropractor gave me really helped. However, I'm also a very health and fitness enthusiast, so I try to work out constantly because I want my body to feel strong. because I felt so weak for so long. Because like when I broke my leg, I had a cast for months, like a full leg cast for 6 weeks, a half leg for 4, and then a boot. So I had to learn how to rewalk again. My leg had gotten smaller by twice the size. So it's always been, I really want my leg to feel strong. And so working out in addition to doing the exercises with the chiropractor has really made me benefit. I'm not really sure if that counts as a physiotherapy,
Yeah,
but it's my self-induced one.
sure. That's great. Another question here. You said, where is it? Oh, your symptoms have changed over the years. What are some symptoms that you used to experience that you no longer have? So that the people can hopefully say, oh, that symptom will go away. What are some things that have disappeared for you?
I'm better at reading. Like, I'm trying to think. I remember in the hospital, I my mom used to get me to read books out loud to her, and I couldn't do it, or I'd have a lot of struggle with it, and I'm better at that now. In a lot of social situations, I can handle them better. Being in large crowds, being around people I don't know. Like in the mall, I used to be too scared to ask an employee for help. Um, I get my sister to do it. I'm better with that now in terms of talking to strangers, some other symptoms. Um,
So you talked about the light
yeah, I'm still very light sensitive.
okay.
Um, for sound, I don't get overstimulated as much. I'm able to process things a little bit easier and a little bit faster than I used to. And I can understand people better when they talk to me now, because I wasn't really good at understanding tones in people's voices. So that has definitely improved. Um, and I think a lot of, like, for social side effects, it's a lot of it is self-consciousness and like, or confidence and how you feel. Like I said, I used to have a really hard time talking to strangers and being in crowded rooms. And I think that stemmed from the alienation I felt in my head. So a lot of, yeah, it's mostly just my brain's getting a little bit faster and a little bit smarter. Every time I have an interaction with someone, I reflect on it if I felt I didn't handle it as best as I could. And yeah, for sounds, I don't get overstimulated as much, which is nice. Like I used to hate concerts, loud music with flashing lights, and now I love it. And it's really fun. So you can hate something, and then if something's really troubling you, in like a couple months or a couple years, you could end up enjoying it again, which
Right.
is really promising.
Good. Are you identical twins or
We're
fraternal?
fraternal.
Okay.
But it
So
was so funny. Sorry, it was so funny because I had this bright green cast, and my teacher still mixed us up, and I was like, it was just so dumb.
well, maybe they had a brain injury and it's hard for
Yeah.
them. So, this next question, it's really, you just alluded to it. It said your injury has allowed you to open up more. And that's why I was asking if you were an identical twin or not. But is that something that opening up, do you think that was just maturity and was within you? Or do you think that because of your injury that forced you to have that as a coping mechanism, that you had to open up and you had to work at it because of the injury?
I think the injury set me back a lot. Um, I don't know for sure because I did only start opening up a couple years ago. I really think it set me back in my personal relationships, my trying to form new relationships. I never used to tell anybody anything about my personal life. Um, I'm trying to think of how to word it. I think yes, I think it really set me back, and it took me a very long time to overcome the fact that I was made fun of for a lot of my symptoms. And rather than being embarrassed by it, that to laugh with it. Like, yeah, it's a little funny that I mix things up, but it's just quirky and who I am. And I don't know. Now that I go with it, other people, they don't make fun of it, but they see it as more of a positive thing. So to go back to like the original question, I think my brain injury set me back. And I think embracing the symptoms as a part of who I am helped me to open up more.
Right. Okay. I think that's it for the questions. Anybody else have any questions? Just send them to me. I think this has been very interesting.
Yeah.
What is it from a career perspective do you want to do when you finish your education?
Thank you for asking, actually. I want to go into the social aspect of brain injury rehabilitation because I don't think I'm smart enough to be a doctor, but it's very important to me to engage. I think everyone who has a brain injury should try their best to engage in mindfulness because it's a really, really beneficial coping mechanism. And I know even the one coordinator, Christina, she works at a yoga studio called Love Your Brain Yoga, and it's yoga specifically to help brain injury survivors with their balance, coordination, feeling more in touch with your body. And so I want to be able to do something similar in terms of mindfulness in modern society, which is actually a course at McMaster. So to take that, exercise it in either a mindfulness environment like a yoga studio or just in a rehabilitation center where I can work with people on their rehabilitation and on their execution of words processing and different other techniques.
Great. Any other questions?
Just a little side note, because like my job is so social, I actually get asked a lot what I want to do. And I always kind of tell my story to explain why. And so a lot of people are very impressed because I don't even think I understand how bad it was because I don't remember it. My mom won't even talk about it really because it makes her, she'll cry. Um, but I actually have people say rude things to me like, oh, people ask about the scars on my legs. And they'll say like, oh, what are your trauma scars from? Like you should say you got bit by a shark, which I think is offensive because why is my near-death experience not good enough for you?
Right.
And it kind of also just shows that people only care about the physical, like what they can, the injuries they can see. Because when I say brain injury, nobody really like pays attention, but as soon as they see the scars on my leg from my surgery, it's a big deal.
Right. Right.
So it's very interesting to see that aspect of it as well, because you could be walking by like 10 people who have had TBIs, but you would never know.
Yeah. Good.
Ask her if she has any. Do you have any reservations of doing any activities because of the accident? Like, are
Besides
you
skiing?
other than skiing?
I like what sports I did play.
Yeah.
I played soccer and volleyball. It didn't really set me back. Obviously, for a long time, I couldn't do any exercises because my leg was so sensitive. The surgery itself hasn't affected me. But like I have weak knees. So anything that involves a lot of bending, I don't like. So I didn't play sports for like I played for a couple years, but then afterwards I was too worried about hurting myself. I stopped. I have compression stockings because I actually have pitting edema, which is, it's kind of just like when your leg and your foot swell up. But I like to I want to target it early so I don't get compartment syndrome again because it is likely that I will. And at that point, I don't know if I'll have to get surgery again or get my leg amputated. So I'm just very cautious with what I do now.
Right. So what's the most important piece of advice that you give a new brain injury survivor?
Have a strong support system and people who aren't going to make you feel alienated. It's obviously important to normalize the experience, like try and make things as normal as possible, but also to embrace the fact that things aren't necessarily going to go back to normal. So I hope that makes as much sense as I can. Like, you don't want to be treated like, well, at least I didn't want to be treated like I was this little victim that needed pitying. I just wanted my normal life, which was very nice. But like I said, I had trouble opening up because I couldn't embrace my symptoms. So obviously, strong support system, have people there for you to make things as normal as possible, but who are also going to accept the new you and how you've changed. And I would say that's most important.
Okay.